everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on advance in Nikola Tesla technology in 21st century. We have world famous speaker and scientist, Madam Viva, and right now she is closely working with the emerging economy to solving the climate related problem. And today we also have earthquake, we have heat wave. So climate change is a major issue for emerging economy, especially for the Asian country. So we need more help from reduction techs. So Madam Viva gonna explain, gonna discuss about our technology, and already we are communicating with different government agency, corporations, and academy for inviting reduction techs to our economy because this is essential right now how we are observing this kind of natural challenge. This is very, very important right now. So, Madam Viva, what you want to share? If you have specific presentations, you can share with our audience because right now World Talent Economy Forum working with a different largest company and the government agency for your corporation. So, hopefully, our collaboration will bring more success and help bring more help and opportunity for our grassroots level people. So, Madam
Yes,
Viva.
and we need more purchases of carbon removal planned from the emerging economies. We know the emerging economies are in a morally slightly better position than a lot of the developed economies when it comes to carbon removal, but there's still going to be some need for purchase from the emerging economies to cover their own footprints because they actually do have a footprint. Like, for example, in Bangladesh, I looked at the satellite maps of where you are in the Dhaka area, and it's very developed. It's a fully modern, and Bangladesh is going to move out of the developed country category and go into the more developed countries by 2025. So basically, a lot of emerging economies are going to, advance. And as they do, there is a carbon footprint. So we would like to be there for them because we think we do have a top-notch approach with the hydroxyl dispersal technology. So I have a YouTube channel with about 35 videos on it that explains everything about it. It's at Viva One Cable. That's the letter at Viva One Cable on YouTube. And you can go there and learn all about hydroxyl. It is a naturally occurring compound in the atmosphere and in water as well, that is made at night and in the daytime by sunlight, and it cleanses. It's known as Mother Nature's detergent. Okay, so it removes almost exclusively every pollutant known that we can throw at it. That includes the polyfluoroalkyl substances and all the benzene ring compounds. The fluorinated compounds get damaged and removed significantly by it. And if there are higher levels of it, more of it's removed. So during the course of the video live stream series that I've done about the hydroxyl here in the spring of 2023, we covered all of the compounds, as well as the fact that hydroxyl removes every single greenhouse gas known. Okay, so that's the refrigerant gases, the short-lived climate pollutants, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, ozone, and of course methane and CO2. So because it does that, it's a proven fact that it's projected in a document that I can show you with a graph in it that has all the moved on. It's twice as fast as any other carbon removal technology when it comes to the cooling impact, and that's been done by independent peer review. So one of the reasons that I wanted to come on this morning was to talk about the emerging economies and that they need affordability, and we are starting our per ton price at 187.50 US per ton, but we will scale to $51 a ton, and we have the capacity to remove 2.1 gigatons of CO2 per year, year in and year out. And we think if we do that, we should be doing that for 60 to 70 years. No more than that size at once, because it is a comprehensive atmospheric removal, and it does have impacts on other aspects of the Earth system. For example, higher hydroxyl levels also trigger cloud precipitation mechanics and normalize rain. So as we increase our CO2 levels, if we're in fact going to be really illogical and continue to do that, then we're going to need something to compensate for the cloud loss and the precipitation loss. And I think that the hydroxyl will if its levels are boosted, it will actually help with keeping rain happening and cloud cycling happening. So we have to get it into the areas, get it working, get to know how our triggering system works. And the main thing that I want to tell the emerging economies is that we can remove all your carbon footprint from one location in Canada, right, Sharif? So it's one
Yes.
atmosphere. It's one atmosphere, and we can do it right from one location. We can have, another major location. We're looking at, and preliminary discussions through Sharif and a few others for the Asia area of coming in with some kind of production plant there that would help with the drought and the cloud cycling in the Asia area, because we not only can we trigger precipitation, but we can also suppress it and calm it down. And hydroxyl's ubiquitous presence is like a surfactant in the atmosphere as well. So it smooths the movement of the molecules, which calms the weather down, which is a really important and notable impact. So this is what we have for the two main thrusts of the company are a total global mitigation at 2.1 gigatons a year, and then climate modification and inclement weather calming. So that's one of the things we would also like to offer to the areas where we think we can get in and work on an area climate system and calm down the heat waves as well. They'll take a little bit of time, but we should be able to alter the heat wave patterns and possibly break them up and calm them down. So that's my introduction.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, we are discussing on Nikola Tesla innovations. This is one of our major objective right now. Beside that, Madam Viva, she has innovations on for solving this climate change. So World Talent Economy Forum actually collaborate with Reduction Tech, and we are promoting our technology in Asia. And we are getting very good response from the Asian market, because we have a lot of challenges right now for climate change. We have heat wave, we have earthquake, a lot of natural disaster and challenge happening right now. We need to save our countries. We need to solve our problem as soon as possible. So what is your observations, and how we can work together to solve these climate change related issues? If you want to relate with these things to Nikola Tesla innovations, or any of the innovations can help us, like green technology, green innovations, I want to welcome in this discussion.
Well, Sharif, you asked 9 or 10 questions in that one question, so it's going to be kind of a fun. Wait, this with you with that one. Let me unpack it a little bit. Nikola Tesla had some great inventions going through it. Even more importantly was his thought process. Even more importantly was the fact that he showed that you can have impacts and lasting impacts going forward, which are real important for today. Your second little part in there is very interesting because we were tying his inventions into sustainability. And some of them were very much tied to sustainability. Others were not necessarily so, but it shows that you have to work a broader view of technology, a broader view of what you're trying to do. What was real interesting with him was, for example, the number of patents he produced, the number of places he had impacts. I mean, he had patents in, I believe it was 26 different countries at that time. And 275 patents in 26 different countries, which was very interesting when you begin to look at that. You know, he was actually finally inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame back in 1975. But the process you're talking about, Sharif, I think is very important for your constituency, your entrepreneurs, your universities, your governments to understand is that they have to begin to look at a process to move forward with. Some of the Nikola Tesla technologies as part of that process can begin to be employed. But they also need to learn that one of his difficulties, and this is one of the best lessons learned when you look at Nikola Tesla, is you can invent, which is great, but you have to deploy. And Nikola Tesla's greatest failure is he didn't commercialize his inventions. He didn't partner with people. He didn't use group intelligence with people who could take them and make the difference and take them and commercialize them in a way that could have the impact that in your question, Dr. Sharif, you were asking for. How can my country, how can this region, how can the world use these inventions, use this innovation to have an impact? And that is often the most forgotten part of the innovation process. The example, I use two examples really as I'm talking about this. And let me start with one of them and I'll finish with the second one. And Sharif, you're making me hungry already with my first example. I like to look at technology that's developed, particularly at universities, as someone trying to bake a cake. And you put the ingredients in a cake, you put it in a pan, you put it into the oven to bake. But let's say the cake is supposed to bake for 30 minutes and you take the cake out of the oven in 10 minutes. That's what most universities do. Universities will take the invention, they'll bake it for 10 minutes so that there's a little bit of a crust outside, but it's really gooey in the middle. Most university research I've seen has been that. And Nikola Tesla's research was kind of the same way. He did the invention, but he didn't bake it long enough to go and become a product. He didn't commercialize it. Same failure with most universities, and particularly in universities in developing nations. But the second thing you have to understand is that you have to create a pull for technology. It's really hard to push a rope. Real hard to push a rope. So when you have technology that has baked long enough to be commercialized, you've got to create the pull for it. And you just can't push that rope hard enough and you're not going to be successful. And the final thing on this one, and I'm sorry I'm using my analogies, but they work well for me, is the most successful technology transfer vehicle. Do you know what that is? What's the most successful technology transfer vehicle? I'm going to tell you it's a moving van, because you want to move people with it. So when I'm doing technology transfer from a research and development consortia or from a university or something, I want to move people with it from the research to the commercialization. And that is the very, very best way to do it. So Sharif, that to me is the answer that you asked me, is how can I have an impact in your countries, is understand it's a process, but you have to pull all these elements together, like we've said. And I loved your smile on my cake analogy. But if you look at, and particularly David now, if you look at it in the real world, that's not a bad analogy how most research is done. It's just a crusty outline. It's so gooey in the middle that you can't do anything with it. And so you have to work those processes to make it happen. And that, like I said, that's one of the biggest lessons I take away from looking at Nikola Tesla, is he was a brilliant, brilliant inventor in getting the crusty part right. He just didn't know how to bake any of his inventions long enough and how to create the pull on that rope. And since it was mostly only him inventing, he had no moving vans to move people with it to make it successful technology transfer. So Sharif, that's my remarks.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, World Talent Economy Forum already collaborate with Transhumanist Party. Transhumanist has lot of scientists, and it's very hard for us to inspire the South Asian community for engage with more research and innovation. So that's why we are organizing this Nikola Tesla Technology Conference, and we are trying to motivate our leaders, our universities, our political organizations, our largest corporations. So, how Transhumanist Party's scientists can help us to do the real job?
Yeah, hello everyone. And excuse me, I apologize for my late entry. I had an earlier appointment that ran long. Well, to your question, Sharif, actually, before I get to your question, I want to say, David, I enjoyed hearing what I did of what you spoke about. And Viva, I'm sorry I missed what I'm sure were excellent introductory remarks. So my tardiness, if I cover some territory that's been previously covered, please forgive me. Sharif, to your question, how can scientists that are in the Transhumanist Party help? Well, I think they're helping every day as they stand now. You know some of those scientists that are also members of the Transhumanist Party and some of the work that they're doing in AI. Perhaps you know some that we have that are working in chemical engineering and a number of other scientific disciplines. Perhaps your question is more aligned with how can they help spur perhaps research in your country and in other countries throughout the world. Perhaps that's done by inspiration, but I think it's also done by partnering. People participating as we can these days with the long distance tools that we have to be able to participate in research. I know some of the AI scientists have used people from all over the globe in many efforts to utilize their talent for sure, and their education, their training, but also the cultural backgrounds too, so that AI doesn't become too narrow to, say, a specific American or even a specific subset of an American point of view, or English-speaking point of view, or however you want to frame that. So perhaps that's at least an answer in part to the question, at least the way I interpreted it. It kind of goes into what I think about talking about Tesla on today's show. Tesla was a great inventor, as David Smith pointed out, and also pointed out the feeling of lack of commercialization. One of his biggest, one of the areas that he worked in that excites me the most, maybe that's a better way to say it, is this whole idea of wireless energy transfer. At the time, he was talking about not needing to use high power lines and to be able to move power through the atmosphere. Where I focus on that today is taking what I would consider taking solar to its ultimate use, being able to capture solar from space at whatever appropriate orbit that would be. Probably a geostationary orbit, but I don't know. I'm not an orbital specialist in orbital mechanics or in energy transfer, but I do find this fascinating, and I'm hoping that there are scientists that consider themselves transhumanists, maybe aligned with the transhumanist party, that could be working in this area, because I have solar on my roof. And at this time of year, I'm in the northern hemisphere. This time of year, the days are longer, getting shorter now. And we have a lot, and I'm in Arizona, so I have a lot of exposure on my roof for solar cells and can help put power back into the grid and ease my use here in the house. But as the saying goes, solar only works in the daytime. The nice thing about above the clouds in space is solar is 24/7. Well, or at least pretty close to that, because there are some other considerations, but very close to 24/7 capture. But how do you get that energy from up there down to here? And that's where I think the wireless energy technology could work quite well. I spent, before I went into the systems engineering in the computer world, I worked as a technician in electronics, primarily radar systems for air traffic control and a number of things like that. And then so oscillators and a lot of the components that we use inside those systems that I had something to do with years ago. Tesla would have had an influence on those, and those have been continued to be revised and refined and perhaps adapted to this more solid state structure. But keep in mind, there's still areas of high energy electronics that require those very stout tools that, such as those high frequency oscillators that Tesla did pioneering work in. So those are two areas. Those are two areas that I would love to see science working in. Those are two areas that transhumanism in general and the transhumanist party specifically would be very encouraged to see brought forth into the future, because the goal is to make life as good for as many people as possible. Abundance of power, refined electronics, all of those things have that potential to do that. So those will be my opening comments for this morning, Sharif.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Viva, so what's your thoughts on climate change? How we can move fast? Can you unmute yourself, please? Madam Viva, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, climate change for sure. Yes. I just like to mention that with our technology, the primary power source that we're going to utilize when we start to scale is going to be solar. And we're very excited to see all of the innovation that's happening in the solar collection technology field. The panels are, they're getting so sophisticated now that they think they can install clear panels as window technology for everyone, so we can collect power at the same time. But for us, what Tesla's knowledge transfers to us as is power conditioning. So the way to condition the electricity that comes off of the solar panels is basically his area as well too. And so we'll have, big inverters and transformer system associated with our larger technology deployment. And, this is very true what David said about deployment. I think, I can really commiserate with Nikola Tesla a little bit, because I have written a few patents and done some inventing. And I have to tell you that it is its own mindset when you do it. And I know that as a female, the other thing that's happening is not a lot of women are involved in the inventing process. So sometimes we get treated a little bit like a criminal for doing that. But nonetheless, I think the process is still the same when you're cooking up ideas and solutions and looking at problems to solve. I think you can get trapped in that whole realm, and you make a trade-off when it comes to the commercialization aspect of it. And so with Nikola Tesla, what happened was other people had to follow his work in some detail, other gifted people, and then take on the mantle of commercializing and scaling up his technologies, which has happened quite extensively, to the point where we're all still honoring him with this particular program. The other thing is, I think with climate change, the technologies that are going to stand the test of time were still emerging and born out of some of his inventions as well, especially around electricity. I think that's really important for us to understand. And electrifying the whole grid, the appliances, making everything, the heating and the cooking, all electrical. I think that stands as a strong testament to the whole area of inventors in electricity. We're just having some problems with the storage aspect of it right now. For electrons, they're very difficult to store. So hopefully that will be resolved and we can continue on with a smaller footprint on the planet, because it's not only about climate change anymore. There's a huge pollution footprint that needs to be confronted by everyone, and we're trying to help do that as well. But it goes beyond the greenhouse gas overload. There's also record pollution levels as well too. And so one of the things that I wanted to introduce here, and then I'll pass it back over to you, Sharif, is that we have issued a science warning letter that the hydroxyl itself in nature is now fully inundated. And that's been our Goldilocks molecule along with ozone. And that's kept everybody, having access to relatively fresh air. But now it is fully inundated. I go into the detail of that in a paper that's available under my name, Viva Cometh at academia.edu. And I'd like people to understand that we have, we've maxed out the environment when it comes to the cleansing ability. So with that, that includes the climate change as a big factor in that. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Martley, we are discussing on Nikola Tesla innovations, climate change-oriented innovation, transhumanist innovations. So we are trying to inspiring the emerging economy for more, more research and innovation, and investing in the research. So you are a media person. So how Pod TV can help us to promote this research and innovation worldwide, and we get more support from the global community.
I mean, part of the thing is that unfortunately, a lot of folks don't understand the innovations that Nicholas Tesla made in the time that he was living, but I can say that about a number of inventors that are out there, and that is something that we have to do a better job of, both in the media and in our education system. I mean, a lot of folks, even here in the United States, have heard of the name, definitely, of George Washington Carver, who was a great inventor and found all kinds of uses for peanuts, but was in the African American community. But they hear that name, they know that he was involved in that space, but they don't necessarily know all of the various things that he was involved in inventing and all of the various things that he was involved in that process. I mean, one of the great things that is a part of the nation's capital, that me in DC, is the fact that a major architect that was in the African American community, a community that I hold dear to my heart because it's part of my heritage and everything, was Benjamin Banneker. So as you're going around DC, those of you that are fortunate enough to travel it and you see these architectural wonders and you see how it is designed, it was actually under his tutelage that a lot of those designs were done. So these are just examples of history that is oftentimes not reported enough, and that is not even reported enough in our school systems. One of the things that I get frustrated by, and I'm sure that David, and I'm sure that even Vivia does as well, is that a lot of times we spend a lot of times on the things that are going to grab attention and that are spectacular in nature and that are kind of the sensational nature of reporting. There are all kinds of amazing innovations that don't get covered at all because they are not the lead it leads kind of attitude that is many of our journalists. And I have actually went to journalism school, so I know how that attitude is created and all in that space. So there are folks that are in the scientific realm, there are scientific reporters, there are reporters that do engineering and all in that space. But the last thing that I'll say, and I'd love to hear Vivia's thoughts as well as David, both David's thoughts, is that I know that some of you are in the California area and in other areas that are technologically very much making a lot of advancements. Well, I actually live in the Research Triangle Park. When was the last time you heard a news story about any of the scientists that are doing any of that work in the Research Triangle Park on a regular basis? So that is something that I wish my fellow journalists would do, both cover the folks that were from the past, and I just named two of them from here in the United States, as well as Nicholas Tesla, who was there in Europe and all in that space. But we need to both cover the historical aspect, but also cover those that are doing innovations today. And I hear what Vivi is doing, and I would love to have her come on my show and share some of that knowledge and share it with some other resources that I have as well, because I do oftentimes find that we do not give it as much coverage as should be given. When we're talking about coverage on the major networks, you can almost forget it, because I hardly ever hear anything on the ABCs and the NBCs and those things. It is mostly those of us in the podcasting worlds and the live stream spaces that are doing a slightly better job, but even we can do better as well. But just wondering other folks' thoughts about that, because it is one of my frustrations, is that too often we do not get the coverage as much as it should be covered, or if we get the coverage, it's like a quick 5-minute article, and then you don't get any follow-up of to what the innovations are. So I have seen some innovations covered, but they're very briefly, and then there's no follow-up in that space. So that's just some of my quick and immediate thoughts.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what you want to discuss about the new innovations?
I love the comments so far, and David, Mark, and Viva, thank you so much. Going back to the topic again, advances in Nikola Tesla technologies is a place I'd like to kind of throw my, or most likely be my last remarks today, in that Nikola Tesla is a great iconic symbol for us to use today, and to begin to help bring champions around, set up mentors, set up collaborations, and use as a way to marshal resources for what we want done in these areas. Um, Dr. Leaf, I've lately have been saying this way too often in some of your programs, but one of your board members is so true, Talif, as he talks about these, is that even though he's had power from being at the United Nations and ambassadors and all this other stuff, he goes back and says, if we don't educate the common people, if we do not get them to understand the importance of this, it's going to be slow going. And we see the same thing in areas like this. One of the big differences between what Nikola Tesla was able to do with alternating current versus what Edison did with direct current is Nikola Tesla actually got some of the people behind it. Well, it actually was more Westinghouse who helped get the people behind Nikola Tesla's invention than the other side. But those are necessary to get this done. And you have to involve people. You have to understand that for the sustainability you spoke about, Viva and Sharif, we can innovate locally, but we have to deploy regionally, nationally, and internationally to have an impact. And, I love looking at Nikola Tesla's inventions from the AC current, his Tesla coil that's used so much today in communications and others still long after his death, to looking at the shadow box, which is what many people believe is the basics of X-rays today and where we would be in healthcare without that. And I can keep going on. Plus the fact that he patented internationally before international patents were popular. He showed an interest for intellectual property. But again, his big failure was commercialization. And so, Sharif, I'd like to encourage the people in your audience, your constituency, to use the World Talent Economic Forum as a way to look at innovation, to look at how to take it and turn it into a systems of systems to impact not only their own local community, but to have an impact globally as well. And that's how we change the world, is to take what we're doing locally, partner with others, use group intelligence, and go and solve those grand challenges we have today. Go and solve the problems where it makes life better for everyone around. And with that, I think they will all be successful. And so, you being the champion for that, and how you make resources available to them through programs like this, that you will be successful. But you just have to have your constituency understand it's part of a bigger deal, and it's not just the invention. You've got to have an impact with it. You've got to commercialize it and take it to where people can use it. So, Sharif, thank you again for giving me an opportunity to comment here.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher.
Yeah, before David Smith goes, thanks for those comments. I couldn't agree more. And I'll talk about them in just a second. I do have another obligation coming up, so I'm going to have to make this my concluding remarks as well. And look forward to participating more with you perhaps next week, Dr. Sharif. David, your comment that you've had a couple of times about the fact that Tesla worked alone and was more theoretically minded and didn't bring people in to help commercialize, those are right on. Those truly made the difference as far as attraction is concerned. And I think those in the audience have heard me talk many times about entrepreneurship and so forth, and why I think that's so important in the 21st century, whether you're a classical entrepreneur as is defined by, like a Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or somebody along that line, or what I just call the entrepreneurial mindset, which I think is extremely important for everyone, as an employee, as an individual contributor, as a supervisor or managing or directing contributor in a company. That this whole idea of entrepreneur mindset is important. And the difference between Tesla and Edison, I think, exemplifies that. Edison was able to loop others in, to bring in other individuals and corporations in, and eventually that brought him political power where he needed it, and was able to take his view and expand that, where Tesla's view was nicely wrapped up in patents and so forth, also as David Smith had talked about, but stayed in a world that was more academic. We have to apply innovation. Invention, innovation, entrepreneurship. It has to be applied. So I think there's a very, very good history lesson here. I don't think that anyone can look at the difference between these two great inventors and not come away with that. And that would be something that I would hope that would be squarely taken on by those that follow World Talent Economy Forum. I know that there's a great mindset there for these sort of things, but this is a focus that needs to be maintained, because we've talked about sponsorship of research by World Talent Economy Forum, very important. David's comments about using the analogy of not cooking a cake all the way to where it's finished, only getting it started. Perhaps this is an area where research that World Talent Economy Forum would like to see in your country, Sharif, and entrepreneurs in your country can come together to be able to make these useful to the public. Because commercialization is where the benefit of these ideas, the benefit of these inventions, these discoveries, gets to the masses. Other than that, it's a good idea locked away someplace, but it doesn't benefit anyone. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to go on that remark. I can stay around for just another moment or two, but then I'm going to have to go in about 3 minutes, so I can hear a little bit more. Thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Shoemaker,
Thank you.
Mr. Shoemaker, I know you got to go really quickly. You talked about the entrepreneurial mindset, and I'm definitely one that I'm a big fan of the entrepreneurial mindset. But I'm just wondering, and this is just a question I had for you and anybody else that had thoughts around this: is it part of the problem that we don't encourage that enough? I mean, we know the story of Horatio Alger. We know the story of definitely Christian Gardner, who was a person that was homeless and then went on to have tremendous success and was the subject of that movie, Pursuit of Happiness, and all along those lines. But I don't know that our school systems and our general society are doing enough to encourage entrepreneurship, and that can sometimes be frustrating to entrepreneurs, because a lot of our school system wants you to go to work to get a job, to stay in that job, and to basically be a cog within the system in a lot of ways, and it still has that mindset. But I was just wondering if you think that is something that we need to change from an educational standpoint, whether that is the education from the media or the education from our school systems. And that's a national and a world problem, I think.
Okay, quickly before I go, I'll give you my personal opinion on this, not research, not backed by evidence, other than what I've seen. When I talk to people about the entrepreneurial mindset, many times they think, yeah, wow, that's awesome, that's great. But that's for somebody special, okay? Because the entrepreneurs that are very, very successful get the publicity. They get to talk on podcasts. They get to talk on network shows and so forth, and they're held up as something special, which is true. They are special for what they've done. But the unspoken part about everybody else isn't special, I think, tends to keep that away. And that's why I like to say it's not just a mindset for those big names that we know, but this is something that you can take to your job every day. And it doesn't matter at what level you work. This is something that you can apply. I've talked to people that have applied it, and sure, many times they were told, stay in your lane, this isn't for you. But part of the entrepreneurial mindset is persistence. And if you persist, you'll eventually break through. And these people I've seen have gone to high levels in small business and in the corporate world as well. And they're not going to be names that you're going to see in the media. So to answer your question, and then I do have to go, is perhaps it's not the educational system so much, though that can always help, but parents, and then I think just the general culture can do a better job of that. And maybe there's some way that you can involve that in your podcast as well, Mark. And sorry, I have to run. I can't even hang around for your answer.
No problem.
Thank
And
you.
actually, I've been
Thank you.
doing some of that. I know you can't hang around, but a friend of mine does a Black Business Expo, and he's got a partner, and I actually agree with the slogan that the partner has and everything, which is the notion of genius is common. So if anybody that's listening and watching knows the world of poetry, Bruce George was definitely a poet and was also involved in some of the less than scrupulous activities of a society, but he has this notion that we all have a genius and not just those that are Mensa qualified. So that is why he created this whole slogan of genius is common and recognizing what your individual genius is. And I wish that more people did that and recognize what their individual genius is, whether that's being the genius of being a cook, being the genius of being the best janitor that you can be, to borrow a line from the famous Martin Luther King speech and all of that. But you can be a genius in whatever field you decide to go in and recognize that genius skill that you have. But I'd love to hear Vivia's thoughts around that question and just the notion of even Tesla recognizing his genius as well when he was here on the earth and all in that space.
Thank
Yes,
you, Madam
well, thank you. The policy area for entrepreneurs might be an area that gets interesting for me. When I started to hear about the universal basic income, one of the upsides to that is that people that are entrepreneurial are not necessarily forced to have a job and then treat their ideas as a side hustle. I think what we're doing with our inventors and our entrepreneurs is we're asking them to juggle double the workload just to be inventive and creative. And I think that if we could look at some kind of a policy solution, that would be very helpful in the basic income area, whether it's some kind of a grant program where you prove that you've drafted a patent and you've got a prototype and you meet a few criteria, then you would qualify for a little bit of a stipend to keep you going. I think that would highly, highly encourage innovation. I think it would stabilize things for both inventors and early entrepreneurs. And I don't think it would harm capitalism or entrepreneurial spirit at all. I think it would do quite the opposite. It would enshrine inventiveness within society in a very nice, supportive way. That, a lot of things are asked of an entrepreneur as well too. And I think this is one of the things that I see with Nikola Tesla. He did not repeat himself. Okay. He went on to new things. He as an inventor, he had the mercurial intellect where he could go and look at an issue or a technical aspect of it, and then he could come up with a way to put it together, at least technically. But then he would move on. Now, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be prepared. And I'm telling this for everybody in Sharif's audience. You have to be prepared to be able to repeat yourself about a specific idea and concept and technology at several different levels, not just several, but numerous. You have to be able to talk to the other technical people. You have to be able to talk to lay people. You have to figure out how easy is it for your technology to be adopted by ordinary people. how to make it adoptable to ordinary people, so that you'll get wider utilization from it and more sales, hopefully. So this is a thing that Nikola Tesla did not have. Okay, he did not have that. Uh, common sense. I mean, it is, by trial and error, something that you have to do when you have an idea that you would like to commercialize. You have to repeat it to the banks. You have to repeat it to investors. And, this is where the other thing is that when you start doing this, the other thing that happens too is the people around you, like your family, may get gradually less and less supportive. And this is one of the things that happened to Tesla as well too. People would look at him, what he was doing, and go, gee whiz, he's on to something else. He's got shiny ball syndrome. And this is a criticism that will quickly come out of the business community for you if you are inventing and you have technology that you're innovating on. So you have to be mindful of the fact of how many different ideas you're running at once. I recommend no more than 3 at once when you're doing it. And that will keep you able to focus at least minimally on each of the areas. But you do need to weed and sort your ideas so that when you get to the entrepreneurial commercialization stage, you are repeating consistently on mainly one, maybe 2 technology ideas to all the different user groups and people that need to be involved with you to get it going.
Hey, but just really quickly, just out of curiosity, because I know that I've run across it. I'm sure you run across it. I'm sure that even Mr. Tesla, when he was living, ran across it. So, if people that are listening in Sharif's audience are thinking about being innovators and doing innovative work and all in that space, what advice would you give them when they are running across those outer critics? And I know that sometimes that inner critic can be a horrible enemy, but that outer critics, whether that is, as you just alluded, friends and family, can get in the way. And I'm sure there were even members of Tesla's family that were thinking that he had, fallen off the rocker, to borrow that old expression, and that those ideas that are part of our everyday society. And actually, the name Tesla is associated with many great electronic inventions now and everything. But at the time he was living, I'm sure he was getting all kinds of pushback from both family and friends. So, and I'm sure you've gotten some. So, those that are listening that are part of Sharif's audience, how would you suggest that they deal with that? Because we all run across it, and I'd love to hear your advice.
Well, you definitely are right. I still get pushback. I have a difficult history with family members as well, too, because I'm talking at one level of consciousness and they're at another level of consciousness, and they just don't meet, and you run into that. So I think that mainly there are 2 types of criticism, and it's really, you got to keep it as simple as possible. There's constructive and there's negative. So as soon as you know what you're dealing with, you can adapt accordingly. So if you know you're getting negative criticism, and you know that you believe in your own mind that you have just actually stepped onto an idea that you just shared with them and you got negative criticism, that often is a knee-jerk reaction so that they can get out of the situation of interacting with you. The best thing you can do is move on, okay, and just continue to go through people a little bit, with not flakily, but the people where you need to have the sounding board back to you will emerge. You will find them. You just have to keep looking. And for the constructive criticism, the best thing you can do is not take it personally when you know that it's been constructive. So if an engineer tells you that they think you have a continuous energy, or a technology that has, continuous energy supply that's unexplained, and therefore the energy balance of your technology is not right. You need to sit up and pay attention to things like that. So, seek out the technical people. as much as you're comfortable with, to make sure that you're checking into the technical areas. And a lot of times in emerging economies, you're not going to have highly technical people. So now with the internet, reach out through World Talent Economy Forum and other aspects like this that you can get podcasts on that are technical. Do-it-yourself YouTube videos as well too can help you with your creative process and clarifying whether or not somebody else has a similar technology. I'll give you one example, and then I'm going to throw it back to everyone else. I just checked with ChatGPT to find out how many different ways hydroxyl can be created with different technologies, and it came up with 140 different techniques to make hydroxyl. So, the AI can help you a lot with what you're trying to understand and where you're trying to fit in as well too. Just learn how to prompt with it really well, and it will be very useful for you.
Thank you, Mr. Markley. What's your concluding remarks for today's session?
No, I think that Vivi's definitely brought some great ideas and definitely some powerful ideas, and I would urge people to try to be encouraged in their innovations. Definitely be encouraged by the historical examples that are out there, whether that is Mr. Tesla or a number of others as well. I would also urge folks to definitely use their innovative mind in order to create some new innovations, and in order to, as Vivi was saying, work in collaboration and all in that space. The only thing that I would say as a caveat to that is you also have to be careful and mindful within those collaborations, because we do know that there are some sharks out there, and you need to recognize those sharks, because there are sometimes folks that will manipulate and will even steal the ideas if you are being very innovative. So make sure that you are being aware of that and that you are being cautious in that space. I'm sure that there are even some ideas that Mr. Tesla had that were claimed to be had by others. We know that through history, we've heard that there were other people that were behind some of Edison's inventions. There were other people that were behind some of Graham's inventions, but we don't necessarily know those names because they were not at the forefront of the invention process, or the idea might have been co-opted by some of those individuals that I just mentioned, and all in that space. So definitely, as we are in the 21st century, be very mindful of your continue doing the innovative work, but also be mindful that your work is not being stolen as much as you can be.
Madam Viva, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Yes. When you're, doing inventive processes, a lot of people keep a notebook and write things down, sign it and date it. And, one of the things I used to do was get 1 or 2 witnesses to sign an area on my notebook and date it as well, to witness that I had that idea at that time and date as well too. Though sometimes those analog records have weight when it comes down to litigation in the future, so you might want to do that as well. And I encourage people to start considering making advanced purchases of our hydroxyl dispersal technology, and you can do that at reductiontech.com. And our YouTube channel is at Viva One Cable, where I explain all the amazing aspects and all the upsides to hydroxyl dispersal. Actually, I haven't found a downside. The only downside is that we have overloaded the atmosphere with pollution to the point that the hydroxyl is now inundated. But luckily, we're around and we can offer everybody to reinstate some levels that will keep a pace of climate change and pollution levels and air quality. So thank you so much, Sharif, for giving me this opportunity to share. And we all, I would just like to mention Nikola Tesla has a statue at the Niagara Falls complex, which he was responsible for the Ontario Hydro. And it's a lovely, lovely area to visit. So Niagara Falls is wonderful, and his technology is on display there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Viva and Mr. Markley, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you, bye bye, and take care.